Thank you for joining us today. We're so glad that you did. We want you to know that we here at the House of Destiny care about your needs, whether it's physical, financial, or spiritual. It's important to us. You can email us at hope@houseofdestiny.org, and we would love to pray for you. You are special to God, and you are special to us.
This is how we win our battles, and this is how we win our battles. Not just fight, but come out victorious, and this is how we win our battles. Oh, be my song. I cannot contain. I cannot contain it.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Wasn't that a wonderful time of worship? I think we've had a really fantastic year. There's a lot of turmoil in the world. I know there is. The last time that we met together, and I was with you, we were talking about the Tower of Babel. And for those of you who might have missed it, it was aired on the 11th of January, and I was comparing our current situation in the world to the Tower of Babel, the focus on socialism, communism, the balance of the right and the left, the conservative and the liberal, and how destructive it can actually be when that becomes unbalanced. And in the case of the Tower of Babel, the attempt to do things in our own name and not in the will of God was really the core of the problem. One of them is that they took it upon themselves to build a tower to heaven. And when I look at that, when I think about that, and when I pray about that, I see this rise in the desire to move towards socialism, which ultimately becomes communism, as history has taught us. This is very similar to what happened there at the Tower of Babel. They made idols. So you have the idolatry, the language representing the culture. And so that was just a little recap, because it's been a little while since I spoke to you. And in my time of prayer and contemplation over this, and watching the world and watching what's going on, I can see that the battle really now is between a globalist agenda and a nationalist agenda. And the nationalist agenda has been really sort of made to look like it's a racist thing, or it's a rejection of other culture, to be proud of your nation or your culture, where you're from. Now there are people who do evil things for those reasons, but that doesn't, you can't blanket everybody that way. And I was thinking about it, and a couple of years ago, it must be a little bit over a year ago now, I was invited to Azusa Street and to go to the house at Azusa Street, where it was a great move of the Spirit 100 years ago now, about 100 years ago. And it was quite an experience for me to go to that place. I was taken by Chuck Bethany, who played backup keyboards for my dad, and Chuck called me out of the blue and said, "You got to come with me." And so we went to the Azusa Street house. And it was at the Azusa Street house that the tongues of fire came down and everybody began speaking in tongues. And when you speak to people who don't understand, especially nowadays, those of us who speak in tongues and have the gift of the Spirit, people who don't understand it will look at it as if those crazy people, what are they doing? But when I look at it, I think about the Tower of Babel and the necessity of God to divide the language so that the people could not communicate with one another in their endeavor, which was not his will. And we now live in a world that is moving toward borderless and that global agenda. And as well-meaning, many times people are well-meaning and are doing things out of love. They don't want people to be hurt because of external things like race or nationality. And so you inherently want to fight for fairness and the right and of everybody to be treated fairly. And I 100% agree with that. And I know many conservatives and Christians who believe that too. And so there has definitely been an agenda, maybe you could call it, to demonize people who stand for certain things and sort of blanket everybody and say, oh, well, you're this, that, or the next thing. And this is, again, this confusion of language and our inability to speak to each other. And I look at a globalist agenda as a Tower of Babel because it's coming from a place of human secularism. It's coming from a place that rejects God, that rejects our Maker. And we already discussed that before. And what I found especially when I went to the Azusa Street house, was that God gave us something very, very special. And it also goes back to language on the day of Pentecost. And so I actually wanted to read to you a little bit from Acts chapter 2. And I feel that this is the place that we're in right now. And so that's why I want to share this particular, you know the story and you can read the story. But pay particular attention to these few things. When the day of Pentecost had fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. So they were in agreement. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Then there appeared to them divided tongues as of fire, and one sat upon each of them. So think about when you are speaking in tongues. And so I really have thought about this a lot because of when my dad was sick. When my dad was sick, he after he had the second brain hemorrhage, he was not able to speak. Now, one of the things that my dad loved to do more than anything when he prayed was to speak in tongues. And I thought about speaking in tongues in a different way because of the situation God had put me in. And I thought about when you speak in tongues, your brain is not processing words to create sentences that then must go through the brain and pass through the mouth. There's a whole process. We don't notice it because we do it all the time. But again, language is a tool we use to communicate. What tool could we use to purely communicate with God? And now this is after Jesus has come. He's died, he's resurrected, and he's ascended, and we know he's coming back. After Christ comes, God gives us this very precious thing. And it's the ability to communicate directly from the soul, from the spirit and the soul, which is not hindered by the mind, because our minds control us so much. We're in the flesh, we're in a human body, we need the mind, we have to think about things. I'm thinking about what I'm saying right now before I'm saying it to you. When you speak in tongues, you bypass the flesh and allow the eternal part of you to communicate directly with God. And this is the opposite of what happened at Babel. And so when I'm looking at our current situation and this Tower of Babel that the world is trying to build, make a utopia, make a heaven on earth without God, which is never going to work because human beings are so complex. If you look at what it said there, is that the tongues of fire, or the divided tongues as tongues of fire, sat upon each of them, which meant that each and every one of them had a unique expression that needed to go out. It wasn't a group. The group was together, but it was a unique expression coming from each. Almost like if a band is playing a song and each instrument is playing, and together it's a beautiful song, but each instrument is necessary in order to create that piece of music. And so human beings are so complex and so unique, each and every one of us, that to focus so much on the community and the group is another imbalance, because then the individual is neglected. The individuality is neglected. To focus too much on the individual and not the community, then you have another imbalance. And so it's again, like my dad had said years ago about the dance with God and how you have to be in rhythm with the dance, which is his will. God's will for me, God's will for my family, for my friends, my community, God's will for our country and for the nations of the earth. And a beautiful way of looking at it, and this is one of my favorite scripture verses, is in 1 Corinthians 13, and I'm going to read it to you. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Now, don't we see that a lot? That you have a lot of, especially with social media and the internet and technology, that everybody is now given a voice. And what you find is that when we make it about us and not about God, it becomes a noise and the love is lost, okay? So we have not love, then we become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And I hear a lot of clanging cymbals and sounding brasses around me nowadays. And then verse 2 goes on to say, and though I have the gift of prophecy, very important, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. So even for Christians who are doing everything right and understanding everything right, if you make it about you, because that love that he's talking about is the love that Jesus Christ was talking about. It's not inherent love that you would love your child, but to actually love your enemy. That's real love. I'll go on. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Now, when you're feeding the poor and giving your own body, you would think, well, that's love. But it depends on the condition of your heart. And what is your motivation? Is it to make a name for myself? That's what they were doing in Babel. That we will make a name for ourselves, that we will do it, that I am giving to the poor, that I am doing all these things. And then the glory then is taken, and the focus from God, from our Maker, from the divine, onto ourselves. So that is where the importance of the heart is. All of these external things that everybody's so focused on, that you cannot categorize people and blanket them and say they're all the same, because they're individuals, because of external things. Those external things being where you come from, what color your skin is, what your nationality, what are your political views, which party do you belong to. All of these things are external judgments and not of the heart. And so that's the thing that keeps standing out to me. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself and is not puffed up. Look at our world right now. It is full of envy. It is full of people who are parading themselves around, using a technology that goes throughout the earth and puffing themselves up. Again, that's making it about me and not God. And it's all external. And does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. And that's a real problem that we have, is that there is a distortion of truth. You have fact checkers and you're going to the news and you don't know what to think because of how the information is being presented to you. The exact same information can be presented in two different ways and tell a completely different story. That is not truth. So if our quest is for truth, we have to abandon all those external things, all those things that make it about me or about us or about making something of ourselves, and focusing it more on God and His will, and the humility that is necessary is what we see really missing in our world and our society. So that is one of my favorite parts of the verse. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, just as I also am known. Now really think about that. That you will be known in part, but then you will know as you are known. And that to me really is that looking inside to the heart of the person. That you're gonna know me, the real me, and I'm gonna know you, the real you. And all the external stuff doesn't matter. And so I want to encourage you today in this world of all of these things that I've listed, where there's it's so lacking. God is lacking in this, and you can see it. And when my father prophesied it, not long before he got sick, he said, the church has been crucified between two thieves, an erroneous religious system and human secularism. And when you think about that, that is a profound insight, prophetic insight that he had that day. And I remember texting him and telling him, you nailed that, Dad. Like I wouldn't have thought to put it that way. He said he didn't put it that way, God did, and he was the mouthpiece for God in that moment. And these are the things that we as prophetic people need to be looking at. Because when you had the Tower of Babel, I think about when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child. That was a long time ago. Humanity was more of a child. We now have grown in our knowledge and our understanding, and spiritually as well. We now have Christ who came, and that is the most important part. And we have this hope for the future, but we're always going to have these struggles. That's why God showed me this would be the year of victory. He didn't say it would be a year of peace. In order to have victory, we're going to have battles. And I see this year as being a year of many, many battles and struggles. That all of this stuff isn't going to just magically go away because we pray and ask God. We have to learn from it. We have to learn from our history. Think about your life when you were a child, the way you were when you grew up, how you came to understand things. If you look back at how you thought when you were a teenager now, or if you're a teenager now, when you were a child, you think, oh, I thought that and I was wrong and I completely misunderstood that. Now I understand because I've experienced these things. I've struggled through these things. And now because I've gone through these things, I truly understand. That's what we're going through. But we have to be able to overcome it. We cannot allow destruction, and especially in the church and especially with Christians. You know, that's it, because just saying you're a Christian isn't really being a Christian. Going through ritualistic things, as beautiful as they may be, does not make you a Christian. It's something inside, nothing external. It's not external. It's inside of your heart. That's why Billy Graham and back in the early part of the 20th century, the inviting Jesus into your heart concept that they had. It's because it's in here that that's what God sees. That who is who God knows, and that is what is eternal. That is what lives when this body dies. And so I really wanted to just kind of bring your attention today to, in Babel, God divided the language. We are living in a time where we are divided in language, but now we're looking at it as a cultural, more of a cultural thing, and this sort of rejection of God. And it's so important for us to understand from a higher viewpoint like the Google Earth thing I always talk about, and see as God sees. It doesn't make us God. We're not trying to be God. We're saying, God, let us see what you see. Show us your will. Give us the wisdom. And, prophecy isn't psychic. Prophecy's been given a bad name because people started to treat it. I heard Lance Wallnau say this the other day, like a gumball machine. You throw your quarter in, you get your prophecy. That's not what prophecy is about. It is a large, grand thing. And it has so much more to do. Not to say that God doesn't care about your individual life and that God isn't going to send you a prophet to direct you when nothing else is going to be there. But you have a part to play in that as well. And so in your individual life, in your family, in your community, in our country, we need to be able to see correctly. And as a prophetic people, we have the foundation here at the House of Destiny to be able to do that. And many, many of you who write to me, and those of you who haven't yet, but I know you're out there, who've been with this ministry for this long, understand these concepts. And so we really have to, and it's not easy. It's not easy when you put the news on and you start getting upset. I have to turn it off and say, I'm not going to let this upset me and make me angry. I'm going to try to see as God sees and find his will. And I would encourage you today to utilize the gift of the Spirit, of speaking in tongues, the Holy Spirit. It is an essential thing in this day and age that when we are divided and language is confused, that we have that language to use. That when we cry out to God, he will answer here first. And the physical body we're in and the brain and the mind will process it as it should. It doesn't mean stop thinking, please think. But let it come from there first. Let God, you cry out to him, he cries out to you. You draw close to one another, and then it comes together, and then your vision becomes clear. And you're not going to see everything, but you're going to see enough so that you can find your way through. And that's what all of us are doing together. And if just a remnant of us can do that, we can make a difference. Timing is just everything. And I had found something in Luke, and I'm going to close with this. This is my dad's Bible. Here it is. It's Luke 10. I will start at verse 17. Then the 70 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. Very important, your name. And he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. You heard my dad so many times say that. Behold, I give you the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. And so whatever miracle God is able to perform through you, whatever God is able to show you that you are able to do, the most important thing is to make sure that humility is there and that you don't become overwhelmed by and make it about yourself, because we are together and this is about so much more than that. And everything comes from him and returns to him, and that flow is always happening. And so that's another little section I have for you today on the which is probably looking like it's going to be kind of an extensive study of the days of Noah, because I haven't even talked about Enoch, and I really want to. But I wanted to look at Babel first, and I may not even be done with Babel. Because there's always a Nimrod, and that's an important part of it too. But I just want to encourage you today to speak in tongues, and don't feel embarrassed about it. And people may look at you like you're crazy. Remember my dad wrote that book, Call Me Crazy, But I'm Hearing God? It's okay, because what you're doing is a necessary thing in the Spirit, and it is making a difference in this world, and it's going to help you see. And so with that, I'll close, and I'm praying for all of you. Thank you for writing. Don't miss our broadcast. Don't miss Prophetic Rewind. Don't miss Israel Update. just keep track of our House of Destiny network here, because we're growing it, and we have a fantastic foundation built by my father. And as I understand things, I'm taking you on the journey with me, and you're helping me understand things too. And so thank you for all of you who write to me at codebreakers@houseofdestiny.org. Write to me today if you want to. I want to hear from you, because we're in this together. This is a journey, and we're going to get through this. And our year, 2020, is going to be the year of victory, no matter what battles we face. I love you. Thank you for watching the House of Destiny's YouTube channel. Please subscribe to get all of our latest content. This video was brought to you by all of our generous supporters. If you'd like to give, click the link in the description. We have new episodes every week, so stay tuned, and remember, you're somewhere in the future and you look much better than you look right now.